Good. Okay, so today is going to be all about finishing up our review of the for the exam. Julian, would you please put your phone away? No phones allowed, right? So you're welcome to have your computers up, but not your phones, as usual. You too, Walter. Thank you. Okay. All right. So what we need to do is I've tweaked a problem that we've looked at before a little bit to make it a little more interesting, maybe a little bit more like what you'll see right after Thanksgiving at our next meeting. So this is a case where we're going to develop and then we're going to get a mortgage when the property is ready to be a cash flow producing property. Then we're going to operate for some number of years, and then we're going to sell the cash flow producing property. Okay? So the key thing with this, as I've said before, is set yourself up with what year is in what column and stick with that through the whole problem. Okay, otherwise it's going to get very confusing. Okay, so we have our problem-based data up above, and phase one, of course, is development. Okay, so what's happening with development? You've already been tested on that, so a lot of information is given. We've got what the sponsor is paying for the development, which is basically everything that the lender is not. And I've also given you the construction loan repayment. And I've given you really a good suggestion on how to lay out your columns because this is EOI 0. So what are we assuming then? All the construction costs are happening at EOI 0, okay? Certainly those not paid by the lender, and it would be a good assumption to say that they were. All the lenders were paid there too, okay? So first thing I'm going to do here is set up, this is going to be end of year 1, end of year 0. Clearly, in this case, development takes 1 year, right? Because you never pay back the lender on a construction loan until the development is done, right? So, or you're going bankrupt or something, which we hope is not going to happen, okay? And then I've added something new here because we had some good questions on this and the related homework. That because I've given these to you, they're just numbers. And some students asked, how did I get that repayment amount? And I said, well, it's just given. But what if, a good thing that inspired me to think, what if I gave you these two numbers and I also gave you up here the total development cost? I think we'd have enough so that you could compute the interest on the construction loan, right? The interest rate on the construction loan. So that's exactly my question here. Construction loan interest rate, assuming no fees. So this is the type of loan where the developer just gets a big blob of money at t equals 0, pays it back at some future time. So that's going to clearly be our basic future value equals present value times 1 plus r to the t type of situation, right? So then what we want to do, and that's all I remember, right? And then I rely on my ability to do algebra to solve for whatever I need. In this case, we know we've got a year and we know the future value is what's paid back. We know there's no fees. We're going to have to work a little bit for PV, but let me go ahead and solve this for R first, right? So R is equal to what here? I think we want FV divided by PV raised to the 1 over T. And what am I missing there? I think I'm missing a -1. I think that's right. I think that's right. Oh, you can so not help me. Get out of my way. Okay, hate that thing. Okay. All right, so that's good. So we know the future value. We just gotta see if we can suss out the present value here. So the present value is going to be equal to total cost minus so total construction cost minus paid by equity, right? So that's going to equal, we just got a big field where we're putting our work, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm putting it in cell I-26. You could put it wherever you wanted. So I'm going to say the total development cost minus the, and because of the sign, I'll say plus, okay. What equity paid, so therefore the sponsor paid the rest, okay, the lender paid the rest, okay, and so now I can solve for R, okay, R is equal to, and I want to say minus this guy, oops, minus my future value here. So having a little trouble, which is good to know. If you're having a little trouble getting Excel to point or something like that, just type in the cell that you want. So I want F22. And what was the initial cost paid by the lender? That's in I-26. Okay, and it's 1 year, so raised to the 1 over T is raised to the 1 over 1, so I don't have to worry about anything like that. And I'll just say -1, and let's see what we got here. Okay. All right, and looks like 0, but we know that's not right. We put it in percent terms, add a couple decimal places, and it's 7.7%. So, everybody with me on how we did that? I think that would be a good question as we're moving ahead and getting more confident in all this. Okay. Okay, so next up, development is done. We know everything we need to know about development. So now we're ready to think about the mortgage. Okay, so if it takes 1 year to develop and the construction loan is paid off at end of year 1, when are they going to sign and start the mortgage? End of year 5, end of year 2, end of year 0, end of year 1. It's always when you end that construction loan. At that moment, you get the bridge loan or the mortgage loan, right? Okay, so let me just see if I want that to be end of year 1. I'm just going to go up and make sure that F is my column for year 1, which it is. So that's good. So I'm going to put a 1 here, okay, and I'm going to put a 2 here, and et cetera, et cetera. And now I need to know something about the mortgage terms. So it's a fixed rate mortgage, fixed rate, fixed pay, amortizing mortgage. So I need to know the term. The term is 30 years. So how far out am I gonna go here? You've maybe seen on the most recent homework, there's just going to be seas of yellow, and you guys need to know where to put stuff, like you're already doing in the modeling class, those of you that have it. So I need to pull this out. So you see it's telling me how many years I've got my mortgage going. So before I get out there, can anyone tell me what 30-year mortgage starts at end of year 1? How far out do I want to go to end of year what? Benny?
31.
Absolutely, because 30-year mortgage starting at 1, that's going to get us out to 31. Okay, so, oh no, it goes out to 33. If I went out to 33, I'd be so wrong. Okay, so we're going to go to 31 and not worry that there's more yellow space out there. Okay, and at end of year 1, this is mortgage, not a lease. Is there a mortgage payment at end of year 1? No, right? Because the mortgages payments are at the end of the period. Okay, so therefore there's no interest, there's no amortization. Loan principal at end of year 1, that's all I need in this column. So I just go up and see the terms of the mortgage, and blammo, okay, $841,000, okay. All right, so now let me see what I can do for the rest of the year. So year 2, loan principal at beginning of year 2 is equal whatever it was at the end of year 1. Okay, so that's good. My mortgage payment, I've given that. I've tested you guys on how to compute mortgage payment, so that's a sunk cost for you guys. And again, be a little careful with not necessarily perfect algebraic sign convention, but just be a little bit careful with, what you have to subtract from what here, right? The place where you always have to be perfect with your algebraic sign convention is in getting your net comprehensive cash flows for anyone, okay? All right, so the interest portion is going to be, as always, and throughout finance, this is always true, your beginning of period balance times your interest rate. And the interest rate is given as part of the terms for the loan. So we got that. So ain't much amortization happening here. But it's always, as always, the total payment minus the interest portion. And also, I'm always really anal about keeping my decimal places the same, because it really helps you prevent mistakes. At just a quick glance, all of a sudden this looks like a huge number, and it's just because it's showing more decimal places. So I'm going to bring it back to look like everything else, okay? Just a little tip to help you from making mistakes there. And then the loan principal at the end of year 2 is equal to whatever it was at the beginning of the year minus the amount we've amortized, okay? And I think that this is good, and I can pull it over all the way to end of year 31, and it's gonna be okay. But if it's not okay for maybe the third, fourth, fifth time, if it's not okay, how am I gonna know that when I pull it over at end of year 31? We're not gonna end with 0, right, exactly. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's see if I made a mistake or not. Okay, and looks to me like maybe there's a mistake there. Yeah, clearly there's a mistake there. And the reason why is I didn't make this uniform payment a general fixed thing. So I'll just go over here and F4 that. And there might be more mistakes too, but I mean, clearly that's obvious. All right, so let's go ahead and pull this over and see if that rectifies everything. Okay, and that's good. Okay, so if things don't work out perfectly, don't panic. Just look and see. Look in these 2 years, your first 2 years where things are really happening, and you should see something wrong. Also, here's another little tip. If you go too far, okay, what you're going to find here is that you just punch right through 0 if you haven't made a mistake. So this is another way to maybe correct a mistake. If you didn't say 31 minus 1 is 30, and you went out to 32 by accident, you'd look at that and say, oops, I went too far. Okay, all right. So let me get rid of these. Don't want to show these. Don't want to give me any reason to take off points, right? So erase those guys. Okay. All right, so now I think we're pretty good. So we can now get the comprehensive cash flows for the lender, and we can get her IRR. And in this case, as you'll see, I think it's going to be fair to just try the Microsoft formula. If you get anything that looks hinky, you know what to do. Just use GoalSeek, because that'll always work better. Okay, all right, so the mortgage cash flows for the lender, from her point of view, now I'm being careful with my algebraic sign convention because I'm getting net comprehensive cash flows. So she has a negative cash flow at closing, right? And then she's going to have all these positive uniform payment cash flows, and that's going to go all the way out, blammo, to the last year. Okay, and fees, I have no idea. Let's just go up and look at the terms of the mortgage and see if there are any fees. Okay, so she gets the points. She doesn't get the legal fees, right? The legal fees go to the lawyer, but she does get that. And now we can add up her comprehensive cash flows. Okay, and we'll go like that. And that's pretty good. And this is one of those cases, right, where just the first cash flow is negative and all the others are positive. So first of all, we can get an IRR. And at this point in the course, if I don't explicitly tell you to use GoalSeek, if you want, you can use the Microsoft formula. You don't have to, but you could. Okay. Okay, so let's try that IRR and see what we get. And before I do this, what do I know this IRR better be bigger than?
It's bigger than the interest rate because of the fees.
Absolutely. IRR, the fees always kick up the interest rate, and that was 10%, so I'm looking for something higher than 10%. If I don't get that, I know I screwed something up. Okay, 10.4%. I think that's good. Okay. I'm not even checking here with the solutions. I guess I should. Okay. All right, so then we go, CAG has to operate for the number of years or tertiles or quarters or months they're in this project. So let's go through that. Yeah, Benny.
I had a question about the mortgage-based data. So for the points, it said paid at t equals 0. Should we assume that that's equals 1 for the sake of the line?
That's a really, really good question. Okay, you should definitely. It's at t equals 0 for the mortgage, but this brings up a really good point, because if this was on the exam, as usual, no questions, you would say my assumption is you mean t equals 0 for the mortgage, and keep going. Okay, all right, yeah. Oh, okay.
So at the end of year one is the first year of the mortgage, so we're considering that the end of year one for the project?
Yes, because what I'm doing here is I'm lining up, I've sort of set this global, okay, column E is beginning of project, okay, and then F is end of year one, G is end of year two, etc. Yeah, you can do like we had in the homework. If you want to run dual numbers like we had in one of the homeworks, that's fine. But just remember that for the sponsor, the global starting with development is what's going to be important for NPV and all that jazz. Yeah, good questions. Okay. All right, so we've got that. So this would be better to say paid at mortgage t equals 0, and here paid at mortgage t equals 0. So that was a good question too. Okay. Can move that over to E so everyone can see that. Okay, so you guys got on exam one, we spent a lot of time with operating and getting ratios and all that jazz. So most of this stuff is given to you for operations now.
So the legal fee, that would come under the equities cash flow, right?
Yes, because the lender doesn't get them, and the sponsor has to pay them, yeah. Okay. Okay, so here's all the operating stuff. We have the EGI, we work our way down to NOI, get the before tax cash flow. You guys know all this, and then we pay the taxes and we get our after-tax cash flows to equity, and then we have to move on to selling the property. And this is where it is much more complicated than we saw with the lease. The lease was really simple. Basically, you just walk away with the lease. Okay, so years of operating, we just got to go up here and see what they were operating for, okay? And it starts becoming a cash flow producing property at end of year one, okay? But as we've seen before, and we saw this with the lease too, right? At that time, there's no revenue because a year hasn't gone by yet for them to get revenue. End of year one, think of it as everybody moves in at end of year one, beginning of year two. So there is no cash flow produced from year one. Okay, so we got that, and we're going out to 6 years, which is right for saying the problem statement says they operate it for 5 years, right? So they're operating it for these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Years 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, all right. So that's looking good. So years of operating, just want to make sure everybody understands that. Something like the estimated sale price probably be given to you, or very clear instructions. So what do you get? You get the sale price, and then you have to pay your brokers. That gives you the net sales price. always, you can use the net sales price for tax here, so that's going to be helpful. And you just think through what happens to the sponsor at that point. The sponsor has to pay off the mortgage, and the sponsor has to pay taxes at that point. Okay, so the unpaid mortgage balance is going to be, happily, this is another reason why we did all this mortgage table stuff. So just be sure to get that year right? What time is it now? What time is it now when they exit this project? It's not end of year 5, it's not end of year 7, it's end of year 6. So I go to year 6. At end of year 6, the unpaid mortgage balance is $810,000. Okay. All right, so that gives me my before tax proceeds to equity, all right? And I'm just going to do a little check here because, as you guys know, sometimes I'm a little too fast and loose with the signs. So if I take the net sales price, it better be less than the estimated sale price. If I take the before tax sale proceeds to equity, it better be less than the net sale price. So everything is working in the right direction for me right now. Okay. And now we're ready to get our taxes going. So we'll start with capital gain. So you do need to know that what the IRS cares about for computing capital gain is the net sales price, not the gross sales price. This would be the gross sales price, and then we pay the broker, and that's the net sales price. And that's true for everything. That's true for stocks. That's true for anything you have. You can always subtract your broker's costs, okay? Which is good because it reduces our capital gain a little bit, okay? In a problem like this, I'm probably going to give you the investment basis, or I would tell you exactly how to compute it, okay, without any question here. So the capital gain is always what you sell for minus what you buy for. And if you build something up from scratch, what you buy for is some estimate of the value when you convert it from a construction project to a cash flow producing property. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get that. So the capital gain is about 1.1 million. And the tax will be 15% of that. Okay. And the depreciation recovery tax, you guys know the drill, right? For depreciation recovery tax, just add up all the depreciation that you've claimed, right? And take 25% of that. And that's going to be your depreciation recovery tax. So where do I find all the depreciation that we've claimed? That's what interns are for, right? You give them this big stack of papers and you say, for these 20 buildings, right, we're selling them all right now. You go figure out all the depreciation that we have claimed since we've owned them. But happily here we have it all for us. We've got 5 years worth of depreciation here, and I want to be a little bit careful with, I'm showing capital gains tax as a positive number right now, so let me do the same thing with accumulated depreciation recovery tax. Okay, and so we have about 170,000 each for accumulated depreciation, the depreciation recovery tax, and for cap gain tax. Yeah, Julian. The capital gains tax in general is always what you sell something for minus whatever you had to pay your broker. So if it's a stock, your broker takes a commission on selling that. If it's a building, you don't have to, but you usually would have a broker helping you sell it. And it's minus what you paid for the building. They developed this building, so they didn't pay anything for it. So what you use as a proxy for that is as soon as you flip it from inventory to cash flow producing property, you get an estimate of the value at that point. And you say, that's what I would have paid for it if I bought it. Does that make sense? And there are rules for that too. Okay. All right. Which we haven't gone over carefully, and that's why I would give you an estimate for that number. Okay. All right, so here we go here. So I've just got these repeated down here. When you're doing your own spreadsheets in the modeling class, you may choose to just not reiterate these numbers, more chance for errors, right? But I did it. I'm doing this spreadsheet, so I've got them here. All right, so our total tax we got now, and hopefully I've computed somewhere up here my before tax proceeds to the sponsor, which is CAG in this case, and here we go. I did do that happily. Okay. And now I have to subtract the tax. And I get my after-tax proceeds to equity. Okay. It's $4 million. That's a nice lump to get there. So now I think I have everything I need to evaluate this project for the sponsor, right? I have all their cash flows associated with development. I have all their cash flows associated with managing the property. Phone away, please. No phones, phone away, please. And I've got all their net cash flows from selling the property. So now all I need to do is add them up, making sure I get them all in the right place, in the right year, in this case, and then take the present value of each one, sum up those present values, and that's the NPV. All right, so first of all, let's make sure after all this great work, we don't screw up our years. So I'm going to look up above to my global year. I have EOY1 in F, okay? So that's going to make EOY0 in E. That's looking good, okay? And how far do I want to go here? The yellow goes out to 7. So you might be wrong. Who said 6? All right. Are you confident in 6, even though the yellow goes out to 7? All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. I think so too. So get rid of that 7. Right. Okay. And now you just need to be careful to include everything in the right place with the right sign, and don't double count. Okay, and that's it. So the way I did this was to get the equity development costs on a line all by itself. So I have to go all the way up to the top, and here's the equity development costs are everything not paid, but anything that isn't paid by the lender is paid by the sponsor. Okay, so I got that. That's good. And construction loan repayment, I know that happens at the end of year 1, so I better find that up at the end of year 1 here somewhere. And I do. That's looking pretty good. Okay. And then we have the mortgage. When does the lender pay out that mortgage principal to help pay off the construction loan.
Year one?
End of year one. And if you weren't so confident of that, what could you do? You could just look up to the mortgage and you would see that, right? So here it is, or you could look at it from the lender's mortgage cash flows, either way. Okay, but that's going to be a positive cash flow for the sponsor. Okay. Just a quick note on this. You can turn off your I need to know this for exam 2 hat for a second and tune out if you don't want to get confused. But we're always pretending that the mortgage principal is going to come into the sponsor, and then the sponsor is immediately going to use those funds to pay the construction lender. Usually, almost always what happens is when you sign a deal like this, actually the sponsor never gets the money. This goes directly to the construction lender. Okay, so just so you know that. But we always make this assumption because it's effectively the same. It makes sure we don't forget anything, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right. So the mortgage points and the legal fees. Now, the sponsor pays the legal fees. And let's go see what we got. I know they're up here somewhere when we're first describing the mortgage. Always a lot of running around with this stuff, and that's just life in the real world, right? There's a lot we have to know, a lot we have to keep track of here. All right, and now I need to be very careful with my signs. So that's a negative number for the sponsor, so I want to make sure that's true. Okay. Operating after-tax cash flows, we know now they don't start till end of year 2. Okay. And so let's see, what do we got here? Here we go, our operating after-tax cash flow. We look that up. I'm just going to double check this end of year 2, so nothing hokey is going on, and it is, so that's good. All right. And I should be able to bring this out to year 6 and even bring it to year 7, and I should find nothing in year 7, which gives me more warm and fuzzy feelings that I've got everything lined up right. Okay. And the sale proceeds after tax, end of year, we're assuming they just sell that thing instantly at end of year 6, or like the first day of end of year 7, which is close enough to say end of year 6. Okay. So we want the net after-tax sale proceeds here. Blammo. So, all right. I love the way this looks in a project like this. Always in the beginning, it's looking bleak. There's these huge negative cash flows, right? But then all of a sudden the operating cash flows start kicking in, and then you sell the property and you get a big cash flow. But this means this is, it's always a riskier project when you have a bunch of negative cash flows for a couple years or a few years before things start getting positive. Okay. All right. So I think we got everything here. Let me know if you think I've screwed up a sign somewhere, but I don't think I have, so I can just add all these up. Okay. And what I like to do oftentimes is before I do get PVs or do NPVs or IRRs or anything else, is I just add up without any time value, without nothing, right? Just add up all my cash flows for the sponsor of this project, or the lender for that matter, and they better be positive, right? Not considering time value, because you should be always getting more money out of a project than you're putting in, okay? And if that's not true, either you've made a mistake or it's a loser of a project. And if it's a loser of a project, look in the numbers, find out why, bring that to your managing director. You'll be a hero. You've saved the firm a lot of money and enjoy a great bonus that year, right? Okay. All right. So that's looking good to me. So I think there's hope. And now you guys know how to do this. This goes back to time value of money. The NPV is the sum of the present values of each cash flow. So get the present values first. Make sure you got them all. Add them up, and that's the NPV. So let's get these PVs first. So always the cash flow divided by 1 plus the interest rate. And for NPV, it's always opportunity cost of capital for that player, right? Okay, and discounted back by the amount of time that we got to go back in time to get to t equals 0. And that should be the same, which it is. Okay. All right, so I'm liking this. Why am I liking this? Because this one should be the same at t equals 0. And these are all smaller than the numbers up above. And what's my other quick check I'm going to do to make sure that my formula is right?
Set the rate equal to 0.
Absolutely. So let's just go up and do that for a second. And here's a little Excel tip for you. You set this to 0, and you look at it, and this will also help you not make accidental mistakes. So that now the numbers are the same. If there is no time value, cash flow at any time in the future is same as cash flow now, so that's fine. But now I want to get things back. So it's in the heat of the exam, and I just changed one of the given numbers, and there's no questions allowed on this exam. So I type in 12 by accident, and I get everything screwed up. All you have to do is use the back button, right? So use back, and it says undo typing 0%. So that's going to be awesome. So I do that. It puts my 10% back in. I didn't even have to remember what it was, and everything's cool. Okay. And so now I can sum all these suckers up. And it's greater than 0. So as usual, that means we don't go ahead with this project, right? No, of course we do go ahead with the project if it's greater than 0. So that's what the model is telling us. You also have to think about this is the real world, bad things could happen. Any thoughts on, in the real world, what you might do to do better than just this? If you're doing this in a firm, which some of you are already doing a little of this in a firm right now, is this going to be good enough for your boss? No. What are they going to want additionally, Walter? Fees? Well, we have fees. We have more fees. Yeah, I agree. Anything else? How about like different scenarios? These are all our expected value cash flows, right? What are the cash flows that we're not really sure of? Well, we're definitely not sure of our after-tax operating cash flows. So at a minimum, you'd want to do something like what we did in the early part of the course. Do our expected, our reasonable bad case, reasonable good case. So at least you have 3 scenarios to look at. And you want to do that for these cash flows. What else do you want to do? Development cost, right? Development cost goes up. My friend had a project in Pennsylvania in the excavator, called him up one day and said, oh, there's all this shale, we can't dig it up, we have to blast it, so that's going to add to the cost. And it turned out that was all BS, but shale is highly oriented stuff, especially in Pennsylvania. So this joker literally had, so it's all oriented this way, and if you come in with your track hoe this way, it's just like pulling apart pieces of mica. It's super easy, right? So we get to the site, and he's got his track hoe here digging this way, which is really hard, and it looked like, oh, I can't get through this, and blah, blah, blah. And we just said, turn the track hoe around. We're big boys and girls. We're not going to blast this, and it got done fairly quickly. But that's the type of stuff that happens all the time. Okay. So that's about it for this type of project. Benny?
Why are the uniform mortgage payments not included in the cash flows if that technically is a cash flow?
They are included. They are absolutely included because those are, let's go to, that's a good question here, but here they are.
So it's included in the ATCS number?
It's got to be included in your operating number, right? Because that's part of, to operate, you got to pay that. But that's a good question, and that sort of goes to why you just got to carefully keep your wits about you, make sure you're not double counting, stuff like that. Yeah, good question. Okay. All right, yeah. Decreasing what?
Depreciation.
Oh, depreciation, okay.
So what you did was that you made the depreciation equals present value of loan principal divided by the lease term, not by the development cost divided by the depreciation life.
That might be, yeah, I think assume that it's given in this place, but now let's go dig into it and see. Okay. So where is my beautiful depreciation to cost? Here it is. Okay, so E9 over E39. So 9 is development cost. Yeah. Okay. And E39. Yeah, that is actually correct in this case because, and there is an inconsistency between this and what we're using for capital gain. Is that what you're getting at?
No, both the project on the YouTube videos also have a project, also the operational project. It did have the depreciation. So I was just wondering why the formulas are inconsistent between this and the YouTube video that you posted.
Was the YouTube video this exact problem, or you mean a different problem? Okay, yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look at that problem, but this one is the only one we've done where we've developed, then operated, then sold. Okay, for the YouTube video where we just operated and then sold, there you use the purchase price and divide by 27.5. Okay. What we're doing here, this formula is actually correct, is, see, what are you going to use for your purchase price if you develop the building? What are you going to do for your purchase price if you develop the building? You didn't buy it. So you got to use something, okay? So what the best thing to use actually is some sort of number around the development cost. You sort of say, well, that's what it's worth, okay? And in a situation, I think you're referring to when CMO bought the building and we looked at CMO for a while. In that case, you would use the purchase price of the building and divide that by 27.5. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah.
Can we go back to a random cell? It's E65.
Okay. Okay, E6, there's nothing in E65.
E66, or F65, sorry.
Okay, F65, right.
Okay. How come the fees are positive, but the lawyer's fees are negative? Wouldn't all the fees be negative?
Oh, no, that's a mistake, right? Yeah, absolutely. Good for catching that. Bad on me, right? Absolutely. Those are outgoing cash flows for the sponsor. So I would take a point off for me on that. And then, as you know, I would type in the right number and see if everything else was right.
Isn't it lenders?
Isn't it what?
It says it's lenders cash flow, so it shouldn't be.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were looking down at the bottom. Yeah. Sorry. I'm just not paying close enough attention. Yeah, for the lender got the points. Yeah, so that is correct. But now you got me worried. Now let's go down. Let's go down to the equity and make sure I've got all of that stuff correct. I do here. Yeah, negative cash flow. Thank you. Yeah. See, I let someone talk me into getting a point off. That's like not good. All right, any other questions on this? So the exam is going to be something like that, very much like exam 1, in that there will be a shortened, simplified version of something like this and a shortened, simplified version of something like a lease. The two things you got to watch out for are definitely, as you know, I'm headed towards sea of yellow, right? So more and more you guys have to know what to put where, okay? And you've started to see on the homework, sometimes I don't baby you with every exact line you need to put in here, so I've made you think about what other things may have to go into somebody's comprehensive cash flows and say, oh yeah, mortgage principal has to go in there, things like that. And the one other thing you should know about the exam is on the most recent homework, I did ask you to type out an algebraic equation, and you should count on that happening too, because that shows me that you understand the formulas and not just, oh, I take this cell and I do this and that. So we need to understand everything both ways, as if we're writing on pencil, with pencil on paper and in Excel. Okay. All right. So I'm going to let us go. We do have more to do with the ratios for REITs, but by the time we get that, I know you guys are going to have forgotten it all. It's only about 20 minutes. I'm going to pause on that until after the exam. Then when we're done with the exam, our next topic is going to be to go back into development, but look at it in a very different way using decision trees, which is an extremely helpful tool for developers. Okay, and we'll do ratios for cash flow producing properties with FFO and all that jazz, and then we'll do review for the final. Okay. All right, that's it. So everybody have an awesome Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in a week. Okay.